Welcome to the Radical Lifestyle Podcast, brought to you by Generation to Generation, where you will be inspired by the past, equipped for the present, and prepared for the future as we engage in conversations with people from around the world. Hello everyone, today you have Andrew and Daphne from Generation to Generation, and our guest, I was going to say our friend, he is our friend, but our guest is Daniel Tay. Daniel, for people that don't know who you are, can you just say a bit about where you're from and what you do?
Hi, I'm Daniel T. I'm from Singapore. What I currently do, I work in a charity non-profit organization, and we work primarily with young people to shape the way that they think in terms of character, mindset, and skill sets through leadership, entrepreneurship, and mentoring programs. So that's what I do as a job. But with regards to ministry things, I currently serve in the youth development team. I also serve on the pulpit team, and I run leadership development programs for the youth here in River Life Church.
Okay, and is there somewhere people can go and see some of this information?
For River Life Church, you can always just do a quick Google search on River Life Church Singapore. We should be the first link right there as well.
I'll find the link and I'll put it in the description so people can find it if they want to go and have a look.
Yeah, so a lot of what you're doing is developing the emerging generation into leadership?
Yeah, that's right.
How to do that?
Yeah, I work with a team, and there are a few things that we do with regards to leadership development and preparing the next generation. One of them is equipping them with the practical skill sets, like how do you facilitate, what is discipleship, and how do you practically engage discipleship through conversations. We also equipped young people in the area of biblical literacy. So one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we have developed this program called Leadership Batch, and we put young people, budding young leaders inside the program, and it will last for about 9 months. And through the program, we bring the young people through the context of the Bible. What does the Bible address about leadership? Take them on that journey, create opportunities for them to have God encounters, to journal, to really speak with God and address, and allow them to really have conversations with Him on what's happening inside their hearts. How does He see leadership? And in that process, they come out with a renewed perspective of what leadership is, especially in the context of the end times. Yeah, so I think that's just the overview statement of what I'll say for the programs that we put young people through.
So end times is a very key word these days that's being used here, there and everywhere. What do you mean by especially in the context of the end times? Unpack that a bit for us.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk about end times and the whole idea of eschatology because we are starting to see on a global scale the unraveling of the events that our precious Lord Jesus has already told us beforehand in Matthew 24, 25, and 26. I think a lot of leadership development programs address character, address molding of certain skill sets as a general principle. Like, for example, all leaders should, be empathetic. They should really connect with the ground. They should be charismatic, or they should be competent in a particular area. So it's still very generic, but I think what separates the good leader and the good Christian leader in that sense would be Bible-believing Christians have that perspective of, hey, I am leading people into a future, a situation that has already been given, that has knowledge already wrote out. There's already description of how the future will look like. And based on Matthew 24, it looks like, there's going to be rumors of wars. There's going to be nations rising against nations. There's going to be famines. There's going to be earthquakes. So as a young person, if that's the kind of situation that I'm going to be experiencing, then what do I have to do right now to develop my heart, to develop my mind, so that I'm ready to not just lead myself in that context, but be able to lead my fellow brothers and sisters into that context as well. And I think that's something that's very pivotal. It's something that's very important that we need to get young people, the next generation, to really consider, so that when those times of testing comes, when the end times in that sense starts to really, really, really unfold, they will be able to hold their ground. They will be able to say that, yeah, I know Jesus, I know who he is, and I know what I've got to do to be able to ensure that my brothers and sisters in the faith are moving towards that same direction, that we are moving towards Jesus, and propelling the gospel to reach all the ends of the earth.
That's interesting, because we've had 3 other people talking about, we've had 3 other people talking about leadership, and not one has mentioned in the context of the end times, have they?
No, not yet. Until now.
Until now.
Now.
Yeah, and yeah, go you, Daniel, because it's a big challenge. So when you see these young people, and when you have a vision for what's ahead, it must be a heavy weight to carry if you're not careful. Because,
100%.
So how do you handle that?
Well, you handle that by spending a lot of time on your knees and in prayer. I think with whatever the burden that the Lord places on a man or a woman's heart with regards to people, his church. I mean, he really loves people. He really loves the church. Sometimes it gets so overwhelming, and I think that place to cultivate that same love that he has for people and the church, it has to be done in a place of brokenness, has to be done in a place of humility, to saying, Lord, I can't carry this burden on my own. You need to give me the grace to be able to represent you well, to my family and my friends, to the next generation, to the generation before me even. Yeah, we're all in this together. So I'll say that it requires you to constantly be on your knees, constantly spending time in the Word of God, getting perspective of how much he loves people and what does that mean for me here and now.
Yeah. And we in our conferences often talk about Moses and Joshua, and how Moses trained Joshua to go to a land that he would never enter, to lead a people he would never lead, for battles that he would never fight. And, often today, if you're a leader, you raise up the next generation to do what you do. Whereas Moses raised up Joshua for something completely outside of even his context. And, when you talk about leadership, especially within the context of the end times, that's very much that situation where we're trying to raise up people for a time that no one's ever walked through.
Yeah. I like that perspective. It's kind of like Moses gave Joshua a reference point. He laid a good foundation in how he should lead Israel in the future. So I would say that right now it's a key aspect with regards to the whole leadership development, and with regards to really preparing the next generation. It's super important for lack of a better term, my dad's generation and the generations before him, to really come on board to emulate what are those fundamentals that keep the faith going. They are such a key piece to the puzzle to prepare the next generation to be laid down lovers for Christ.
That's interesting. It's an interesting phrase. What are the key elements that keep the faith going? What have you learnt from your dad then? on that front?
Oh, yeah. My dad is my role model in my life. I'm unabashed to say that. There were a few things that I've picked up along the way because of the way that he lived. He didn't sit me down to teach this to me, but I observed what a fully given man looks like on an everyday basis, just on the way that he behaves. So I've got two things to share on this. The first is when I was growing up, when I was in secondary school, my dad would drive me to school, and there would be this really long stretch of road before I reached school, and he would take the time to say, son, wife, let's gather together to pray and start the day right with God, and we'll submit the various concerns that we have with regards to work, family, school, in prayer. And we did this constantly for many, many years. For as long as I remember, when my dad sent me to school, that was how he started the day. So I understood from that prayer is something that is very key to ensuring that your faith is robust. It's always alive. It's never static. It's never passive. So that's the first. The second thing that I've learned from my dad is his hunger to want to know Jesus more. So this is funny because my dad has this very unique gift of sleeping very quickly. But in his zeal and in his passion to want to learn more about Jesus and to really have conversations with him, he would often plug in his headphones at night. He's laying on his bed. He's like, okay, I'm ready to take on this sermon. Maybe it's Mike Bickle. Maybe it's a sermon from Bethel. Maybe it's Benny Ho. And he would just plug in, and maybe 3 minutes into the sermon, you hear the whole room thundering with his snores. But as much as it is a very admirable attempt there, I remember that those moments, because for the longest of time, I think he's been doing this for maybe 10 over years. This is a man who has faithfully spent time in the Word of God. He's always hungry to know more of God. And even if it means that, okay, I'm just going to have that 3 minutes hearing a sermon for a while, sometimes he would listen for an hour and a half. But this is a man who's constantly never contented with where he's at. He's always hungry to learn something new about Jesus, and he's willing to pay the price for it. Yeah, as well.
Wow. And you learnt that by the same way that Paul said we should learn from him, be imitators of me as I am of Christ.
Yeah, I think that's such a bold statement to say. And I think my dad is somebody, I don't think he's ever said that to me in person, but when I look at his lifestyle, when you're talking about imparting things from one generation to the next generation, the way that he's modeled his lifestyle, I've made the decision that I want to be like that, and I want to be able to know Jesus and keep my heart tender like how he is. Yeah.
Because when we go back to thinking of Moses and Joshua, there are two elements of it. There's the unchangeable, like prayer, like knowing Jesus, which is passed from one generation to the next. And then there's the application of that, which has to be into a new generation and into, as you're saying, into the end times. I mean, I have a moment in conferences where all the young people fall in love with me. And it's when I say this, you cannot say to the next generation, it was good enough for me, it's good enough for you. Because it's not. It's a new generation in a new time entering the end times. And there has to be something that is good enough for that generation, not for my generation. So that's interesting that you brought up the unchangeable principles that have kept the faith going and will keep the faith going, while at the same time having that awareness and application. We're in a different time. So if we're looking at that, the unchangeable continues, but what has happened to the body of Christ, to the church worldwide, has been a shaking, and many, many things have changed, or will change, or need to change, or come into greater awareness. What have you seen happening over there, and what has God put on your heart in relation to this?
So we're talking about the fundamentals, right, of the faith, and just perspective on that. Yeah, I don't think it takes a lot of effort to come to the conclusion that all across the earth, the way that we understand church, the way that we understand fellowship, the way that we understand discipleship, it's all kind of being shaken. Something that I've observed here in Singapore, based on the conversations that I've had with friends and even through my own experiences, when the church and the whole Singapore population was put into lockdown, we couldn't meet up anymore in our cell groups, our small groups. We couldn't really have conversations in cafes anymore. You can't really meet up with people. But strangely enough, with all these different things being stripped away, all you kind of have left with your time is with your immediate family, because you're locked down at home. And even you can't even go to work, right? Everybody is put onto a stay at home, work from home kind of notice. And I think the interesting thing that came out of that 2 months of lockdown, in that sense, there were two kinds of people that I've observed come out from that lockdown. One is, you have individuals that are more mature in the faith and they have been faithful. They take the time to connect with God, connect with friends, connect with cell group, as everybody's just trying to figure out Zoom and run their Christian activities online. But you also have another group of individuals who kind of really slipped away. And I thought that was really interesting, because the context of what does a Christian do when all he has now is time? Do you want to put your heart, soul, and mind into spending time maturing and being faithful to Jesus? Are you going to be spending time building community intentionally, or are you going to come to the conclusion that, oh, I've been waiting to binge watch that Money Heist on Netflix, or I've been waiting to work out a little bit more, get my exercise regime going? Like, what are you gonna be spending your time on? And I think in that very interesting lockdown period, the state of the human condition and the state of our hearts were really, really, really exposed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I mean, I had a moment. Well, I had about 30 minutes of this. Thankfully, it was only 30 minutes. But when suddenly I thought, oh, we can't travel, we can't do what we were going to do, we're not going to be doing pastors and leaders conferences in the same way, I'm here. And I had this moment, like, you have to think, well, that was what I did. It isn't who I am. And if you're not careful, the two things can become intertwined. And so, maybe it wasn't as long as half an hour, it wasn't long, but to have this moment of identity crisis of like, wait a minute, who am I in the midst of it? And I think that's a very healthy thing to do, because you can, when you're in situations like ours, just bind your identity in what you do. But when it's all stripped away at base level, it's, well, who am I?
Because who we are is very much sort of the message that we carry. That is who we are. Yeah. And so it's the us, and then the how we deliver us, or how we delivered what was inside of us. And so, peeling away what we did and how we delivered to find a new way of being able to be us and put that out there.
Yeah. I commend many leaders when they've no longer got the platform, they've no longer preaching, they're no longer doing all this, can produce a major identity crisis.
Yeah, 100%. The phrase that comes to mind is really posture before platform, right? It's a time of really re-looking at our own hearts and say like, who am I, right? What's my posture before God? What do I associate as my value? In that sense, have I somehow got so consumed with the idea that my value as an individual is in what I can do, rather than who I am. So it also shifts into the realm of what are we being consumed by? Is it what I'm doing, or is it what am I being? Am I doing? Am I spending a lot of time and associating my identity with the works of my hands rather than who I am as an individual? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you think of the bridegroom bride analogy that Jesus used with his church, and performance doesn't come into that relationship. I mean, it does as evidence, but at base level it's a heart thing. So what else have you seen that what about this whole aspect of community? Because community is at the heart, and yet in many ways community has been pushed against. I mean, it's called social distancing. So it's like pushing against the very things that God says are really important.
I think that in this whole COVID situation has helped us to rethink community in the sense of how we understand relationships and what are the factors for it to thrive in. And I think, like what you mentioned, it's called social distancing. I think all of us very quickly came to the conclusion that relationships over an online presence, that can sustain for quite a while, but there's something about physically being in the same space to connect over time. I think personally what this COVID situation has taught me is I'm beginning to better appreciate and have this space in my heart to really connect very deeply with people that matter to me. Like the whole COVID situation has given me clarity on how I spend my time and who are the individuals that that I really want to connect with, and are there any simple ways that I can actually encourage them or spur them onwards. So this is, I think, it's quite unique to Singapore. But when the whole country was on lockdown, a lot of Christians, a lot of local churches started like going on a spree of doing food deliveries for one another. And I thought that was such a beautiful sight, because for the single parent mom who is now forced to have 24-hour surveillance on a kid, she has no bandwidth to do the groceries at all. Now you have a brother or sister helping to sort out the groceries. You start to see individuals who unfortunately cannot celebrate their graduation or their birthdays, but there are so many creative ways that at least in my church community, they kind of put up some small videos, custom videos of montages of different people just wishing, hey, congratulations on your graduation, or hey, happy birthday, we just want to let you know that you're being very valued. And then all these food delivery trucks would go over. I think it's just a very beautiful picture of how we've understood relationships and how can we sustain them. And in the context of the church, it's a beautiful picture of how willing various brothers and sisters in the body of Christ are willing to take that step to just appreciate somebody, to show love to them, to encourage them on, as we all go through this very difficult time of COVID-19.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good to hear some of your examples of creativity going through this time. We know of a lot of places where going into this, they just were so shaken by what's going on that they just kind of retreated, saying, "Look, we'll wait until the normal, the old way comes back into play." And we were saying that's not going to happen. Like, we're going forward into something else. And but a lot of places were paralyzed by what was going on, took a lot of time to adjust. If people did, or if churches did adjust, it took some time to do that. Out there, as a whole, how was this shift into this shaking? Were churches sort of paralyzed by it? Did you see a lot of churches rising up in creativity and finding new ways to be?
So I'm so proud to be able to say this as a Singaporean. When we first went into lockdown, there were some churches that had the resources, like the equipment, the recording equipment, whether is it mics, is it the video, is it even the tech know-how of how do you use Facebook streaming, live streaming, or Zoom, or all the different kind of media. And there was a very quick rallying to share the resources around. And I remember, I think it was 2 or 3 days after the lockdown announcement was made, there were a few churches, local churches in Singapore, that actually posted online and said that, hey, to any of our brothers and sisters who are of small family-sized churches, if you are stuck and you are not sure how to navigate this COVID situation, if you're not sure how to like run your sermons, how do you make use of Zoom or all these different video conferencing tools, reach out to us. We've got the resources. We are willing to help you. I thought that was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
That was when the church shined so bright. And I was like, oh, that warms my heart.
That is, Jesus prayed that we would be one.
Yeah, John 17.
Yeah, and we haven't seen the fulfillment of that prayer yet. But maybe this is the start, just a little start of him shifting the church into that unity, because when that is just brilliant. That's brilliant.
Just brilliant. And I think the beauty of that was, it's not just that we are, as a church, we are meeting the needs of our fellow brothers and sisters, but it also, the lines that we have drawn for very long across all the denominations in that moment didn't matter. Didn't matter. It's more important that I show that I love you in the same way that I think Christ would. Yeah, and I think that's beautiful, because in family it's not just about loving that individual wholeheartedly, but it's doing it in a manner that tells them, hey, I don't just want you on my team, but I need you on my team. I need you to succeed so that I can succeed as well. And that's so beautiful to see how the body of Christ, the family of God here in Singapore, was very quick to just pick that up and demonstrate such an extravagant amount of love to one another.
And a twist on what you've just said, it wasn't just, I need you on my team, but I want to be on your team.
Yeah.
As well.
I want you on my team so that we can succeed. It's such a different paradigm shift.
No, that's really cool. We've said to people that this, in time, we will look back at this as a small bump in the road. That the things which are coming are going to be way bigger than this situation. And so how are we going through this and learning from it so that we can better prepare for what might come down the road? And so, out there, the church is connecting together, learning together, helping each other will be a part of that learning process to prepare better for the things which are to come.
Another phrase you said was, how can we? You used that phrase. And I think there's two sorts of responses to this. There's one that says we can't, and the other one that says, how can we? And it's not about how can we do this or how can we do that, but it's how can we express this and how can we express that. If we go down the how can I, for example, for us, how can I do a conference? Well, we can sit here and work out how to do a conference, but that isn't really the issue. The issue is how can we express what God has put on us and the mandate that he's given us. How can we express it in the present climate and into the future? Which is a whole different way of thinking about things too. So what have you seen with your generation out there? And I know we're talking generalities and you haven't got a view of the whole of Singapore, but what has been the reaction, do you think, of your generation generally to what's going on?
Well, I think the first thing that I've noticed with regards to my generation is the extent to which we are bombarded with various things that fight for our time. Like I alluded to this a bit earlier, when we first went into lockdown, and with all these social distancing measures being put into place, everybody's working from home, studying from home even. It's very easy to get very consumed with all the work-related stuff, and it's very easy to, because of that, lose sight of what's really, really important. I think a lot of my friends, in the first month, I would say, of the lockdown, I think a lot of my friends struggled with spending time with themselves, spending time with God, spending time connecting with friends, because at that point of time it was just so difficult. And there was a lot of things that were fighting for their time and their attention. Work was always screaming away. I don't know whether you know, for all the people who are listening, but Singaporeans generally just really, really work very, very long hours. And I guess because in Singapore culture, we are so consumed with efficiency and progress, we've kind of work from home sometimes felt like I'm working forever. The emails just kept coming, and I know a lot of my friends really struggled with how they manage their time in that sense.
I know what that's like.
Right. I think another thing that I've observed with regards to my friends is, I think, at least for those who are Christians, it was a genuine struggle for a lot of them to constantly be surrounded by their family members, which is very strange because I guess the family unit was kind of the original design of how discipleship should be first, but sometimes it felt a little bit overbearing, and I think being put in that uncomfortable situation where you're always seeing your mom and dad, your younger brother, older sister, that kind of thing, you had to recalibrate, what does family mean to me? How do I, if I haven't spent time with my family over before COVID-19, how can I learn to love my parents? How do I love my siblings again? How do I make sense of this? How do I find time for myself? So I would say that that's something that my generation had struggled with in these two areas.
When the Bible talks about the shaking happening, all the things you're saying are the shaking. It's pulling away what we thought was how our nice little world was, and everything's shaking, and we're left sitting looking at the walls that have come down, and the structures and the lifestyle and the daily routine. Everything just suddenly isn't there anymore, which I'm sure God he has done this for a purpose, to realign us ready for what's coming in the future.
Yeah.
And to cause us to reconsider. Many people in this time we know have pressed pause, and they're waiting.
Yeah.
They're waiting for things to go back to how they were. They're waiting to restart what they did in the way that they did it before. And personally, and I think you too, we don't think that's what this time is about. This time is about us positioning ourselves for what's to come. Not just waiting to go back, but positioning ourselves for what's to come. So if we just narrow this down a bit before, what do you feel is on the horizon?
Well, wait, before that one.
Oh.
We've noticed during this time there's a lot more people now more aware of the times that we're living in.
Yeah.
And more aware that, hang on, actually, maybe this whole Jesus coming back thing is closer than we realize. And so there's this more awareness, more people asking those kinds of questions. Have you noticed that out there, that there's suddenly this heightened awareness of the times and people really wanting to understand the times we're in and what we should be doing?
Well, some resources have been circulating around that kind of amplifies this need to recognize the times that we are in. One of them is Generation to Generation. So if you're listening to the podcast, good on you. I remember when I think COVID hadn't become a pandemic yet, but there were cases across different parts of the earth. I know that there were some messages that were going around, and I would say that definitely, at least here in Singapore, based on my circle of friends, I would say that there's a heightened awareness of the times that we're living in, not just with regards to the return of Christ, but with regards to this pause button that's being put on hold in the economy, in and the way that we previously understood our routine and a routine living. It forces you to really not just think about what does the return of Christ mean, but it also pauses it. The pause is also there to put perspective and give us a space to really consider, how do we do family, how do we understand church, how do we understand healthy marriages, what makes friendships strong, how do I encourage my fellow brothers and sisters in the faith. I think that this time is very strange and it's very unique, and but I would say it's really the breeding ground. It's a wonderful environment to be in the sense that this could really propel the church to really focus on the things that matter. And for the things that we haven't if we haven't had a right view on who God is or how we live our lives, this has been a great chance to really reevaluate that. I felt like God is using COVID-19 as like a surgery process. It's like the whole church is currently on a table, an operating table, and he's just taking away and removing all the idiosyncrasies or the things that are not right all across the body. So
it's interesting you say on the operating table. That's never a place people want to be. And if you go there, you're acknowledging there's something wrong that needs dealing with,
and you don't leave halfway through.
No, you don't leave halfway through. That is a really good you don't leave halfway through and see the process through. So
can be uncomfortable, but you'll feel better at the other side of it.
Yeah. So before we start winding up, Dan, if you from where you're at and how you're looking forward, what would you say to your generation who are listening? I mean, this podcast's going out all over the world, and I'm sure many of your generation will be listening to it. What would you say to them, peer to peer?
I would say, don't waste this opportunity to cultivate a lifestyle of having conversations with God. One of the most significant moments in my faith was when I went to a mission trip into India, I had the opportunity to see Mother Teresa's grave. And there were lots of pages of her diary that were just being exhibited at her grave. And every single page was just so full of conversations with God. And the way that God was speaking to her wasn't just in like one word or an impression or a phrase, but it was like paragraphs that God would speak to her. And I think as we make the most of this situation right now, all across the earth, we have an opportunity to pause, realign, and really engage God with conversations about his kingdom, about what does he see this pandemic situation is doing in not just in our own personal lives, but maybe in our local churches, wherever we are at, whoever is listening to this, and really allow him to do the soul surgery, the heart surgery that he needs to do, so that we can be healthy. Jesus is coming back for a pure and spotless bride, and if we don't have our hearts right at the moment, we've got to sit down and lie ourselves down on the ground and say, Lord, here's my heart. I'm ready for some surgery, because you deserve the rewards of your suffering. You deserve the nations. You deserve my heart. You deserve nations. You deserve the world. You deserve a pure and spotless bride. And at a very individual level, it starts with us having that conversation with God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Daniel, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. We love you. We love your family. And hopefully we get to see you again sometime soon.
Nice. It's good to be here.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If it inspired you, please rate us and subscribe on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, or another podcast platform.